Snyder's Justice League was kind of disappointing. Now before I go into this review, there are some things I want to address. Number 1, if this video gets any views, I fully expect to get ratioed in the likes and dislikes and get made fun of in the comments. I haven't seen a lot of negative reviews of this movie, but from the ones I've seen, this is usually what happens. Just because I'm not the biggest fan of the Snyder Cut doesn't mean you shouldn't be. Film is very subjective. Okay, now for the review. I was never one of the fans that has been itching for the Snyder Cut since 2017, and I didn't really care whether or not it happened. But I am not in the majority here because people were hyped for this movie. I even saw YouTube comments saying that it's going to be better than Avengers Endgame. Okay. I pretty much had no expectations for this movie because of how awful BVS was, but I gave it a fair chance, watched it with a fresh mind, and I don't think it's very good. In this movie, Batman doesn't murder people like he did in BVS, but he still isn't great. Batman shows pretty much no emotion throughout this movie. He is so bland and so uninteresting that I honestly couldn't care less about what happens to him next. Next, there's Aquaman, who isn't bad, but isn't great. I kind of liked how Aquaman was kind of funny and witty in his previous movies, but here he was a little boring. He only has a couple memorable lines. One improvement to Aquaman, however, is his relationship with the other characters. He cares about Victor in this movie instead of being kind of a jerk to him like he was in the original cut, and he has some really good heart-to-heart conversations. I just wish he was more fun. That's all. Next, there's Wonder Woman, who is kind of boring. Her main purpose in this movie is just to explain the lore and what's going on to the other characters and to the audience. The most interesting traits she has in her other movies are pretty absent here, and Gal Gadot's performance just seemed a little off. Is it Gadot? Gadot? Then there's Cyborg, who actually has this really good character arc about coming to terms with being half a robot. Cyborg was really good. I didn't expect to like him as much as I did. Then there is the Flash, who is the only character that's consistently fun to watch. All the other characters can be kind of hit or miss when it comes to their personalities, but Flash is goofy, he's funny, he's kind of a weirdo, and I really like that about him. The movie is just way more watchable when he's around. He still serves as the comic relief for the movie, but he's not obnoxious like he was in the original cut. And Superman is barely in this movie, which is probably a good thing. Now the villains. Most reviews that I have watched for this movie say that the villain problem that the original had is resolved here, but I disagree. These villains still only have one goal: world domination. I don't mind when villains have simple goals, but they need to have interesting character traits. Loki's motivation in the first Avengers movie is to rule Earth, but he's witty, he's funny, Tom Hiddleston has a great performance. But Darkseid and Steppenwolf are trying to take over the world, but their only traits are that they're big, tall, CGI monster people that have low voices. Which brings me to my next point. Steppenwolf and Darkseid do not look very good. Now it is hard to make a convincing 100% CG character, but when Marvel did it so well with Thanos, it kind of raises the bar for all the other guys. Of all the superhero movies I've seen recently, this is probably the worst looking. The way they colored it makes everything look like it was dark and gray and washed out. The colors don't pop, and there are some scenes where I just couldn't tell what was going on. There were some times where I just turned up the brightness on my computer because I thought maybe it was just me, but this is just how the movie looks. I watched this movie on a number of different devices, and it just looks like this. There are certain scenes where it legit looks like someone filmed this off a TV on their phone. It's really strange. I understand this is the tone and feel and look that Snyder was going for when he made this movie, but it just wasn't working for me. Now this is a really personal issue and a problem that I'm somewhat alone in, but I just don't like Zack Snyder's directing style very much. Slow-mo in action movies doesn't particularly bother me, especially when it's used well, but here it feels like they just threw in slow-mo scenes just for the heck of it. There are so many slow-mo scenes throughout this movie, and I couldn't find any clips of them. So if you haven't seen the movie, you're just going to have to believe me, but it got really annoying by the end. Another thing this movie has are montages or just slow-mo walking scenes to some dramatic music. These scenes are mostly not very fun to watch, and they permeate throughout the first third of the movie. Again, most of the issues I just listed in this segment are just my personal taste, but of course my personal taste is going to affect how I feel about a movie. I did not enjoy the music in this movie at all. The songs in the original cut were actually kind of good and was one of the only good things in that movie, but the score here was either really generic or straight up poo-poo. There's this one song that played every time Wonder Woman was on screen, and if you've seen the movie, you definitely know what I'm talking about. At first I just kind of laughed every time it came on, but by the end it was so annoying that I was groaning every time it came on. Seriously, this song needs to chill out. The two biggest issues I have with this movie is definitely the pacing and the runtime. I think this movie really could have been cut down to 3 hours, and if it was, I'd probably like it way more. The first third is really unengaging and boring, and I feel like most of it could have been trimmed down or removed altogether. When I got to the hour and 20-minute mark, I thought the movie was going to be awful and that this review was going to be only negative, but the ending did pull it together. Once the team comes together, the movie becomes way more watchable and kind of fun, but anything before that scene where they save the scientist from the parademons was really boring. I was not interested. The first time you even see Batman in his costume is around the 2-hour mark. I think this movie should have cut to the chase quicker and it'd be way better. I don't want to leave this video off on a sour note, so I'm going to tell you the stuff I liked. The action scenes are really good in this movie. All of them are improved from the Joss Whedon cut without a doubt. This is especially evident in the final battle. This final battle ends with our heroes dying and the bad guys winning, but then it cuts to the Flash and he rewinds time to save all the others and the world. The scene really blew me away when I watched it. It was amazing. The scene earlier in the movie where Steppenwolf captured all the scientists is also greatly improved. In the original cut, the League gets there, and instead of saving the scientists, they make jokes, mess around, and nearly like half the scientists die. In this movie, the Justice League go in guns blazing and save everybody. This seems like a minor detail, but it makes the movie so much better. Some characters could be boring at times. The characters' relationships were far improved. The League feels way tighter and like they were written by one guy. I also really like Cyborg in this movie, which is something I didn't expect. We get a lot of flashback scenes with him, and we learn about his powers and how he functions. His arc is really good and really emotional, and Ray Fisher has a great performance in this movie. Barry also gets a good arc. He grows as a character and we see his relationship with his dad more. I also like how it hints at the possibility of having a Flashpoint movie, which I would really like to see because after this movie I'm actually really invested in Ezra Miller's Flash. So yeah, virtually everything was improved upon in this cut of the film. So in conclusion, this movie was way better than the original cut, and there's a lot of stuff I like. The last 2 hours of this movie are really enjoyable, but the first two were honestly really disappointing. The first hour and 20 minutes was honestly a baffling experience because I was not enjoying myself whatsoever. So while I like a lot of things in this movie, the first third was kind of unforgivable. I think a lot of people watched the original cut right before watching the Snyder cut, and I think that might be affecting opinions a bit. Because compared to the original, it's really good, but compared to a movie like Infinity War, not so much. As someone that hasn't seen the first Justice League since it came out, I went into this with a clear mind, and I can't in good conscience give this a higher score than a 5 out of 10. And seeing that my average score leading up to this is only a 4, I don't think a 5 is that bad. So that's my review. Goodbye. Oh, you know who I just remembered was in this movie? Lois Lane. I cannot stand Lois Lane, and I never want to see her again in any of these movies. She's so bland and so lame, her performance is so off. I seriously just cannot take it. It drives me crazy every time these movies reminds me how important she is in the overarching story. I mean, I don't want her to be important. I'd rather have any other character be important. She sucks. Alright, now I'm done. Goodbye.